Welcome to our deep dive into the world of children's rights. You're interested in how this all plays out with family and the Irish legal system. And so we're going to unpack a pretty fascinating article called Children's Rights in the Family, Myth and Reality. It's by Ursula Kilkelly. It was published back in 2008, but don't worry, the ideas are still relevant today.
What's so fascinating about this topic is that people often see children's rights and the family as like being at odds with each other. But, as we dig into this article, you'll see that it's much more nuanced than that.
Okay, I'm intrigued already. Let's set the stage here. I was surprised to learn that the whole concept of children having independent rights is relatively recent, globally speaking. I mean, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC, wasn't adopted until 1989.
That's right. And it took Ireland even longer to get on board ratifying the UNCRC in 1992. This delay, along with how the Irish Constitution is worded, has actually led to some pretty interesting legal situations where the rights of parents and children seem to clash.
So you're saying that Ireland's commitment to the UNCRC might not be as straightforward as it seems. There's more to the story.
Absolutely. And that's where this article comes in. One of the first things it does is tackle a big misconception that giving rights to children equals taking rights away from parents. It's a fear a lot of people have.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a concern. But what does the article actually say about that?
Well, it emphasizes that the UNCRC isn't anti-family at all. In fact, it repeatedly stresses how important families are. It recognizes that parents play a vital role in raising their children and that kids need a safe and loving family environment to thrive.
Okay, so it's not about pitting kids against their parents, but it also recognizes that children are individuals, right? They have their own needs and their own evolving understanding of the world.
Exactly. The UNCRC promotes a balanced approach. It acknowledges parents' rights and duties while also saying that children have evolving capacities and deserve to be heard even if they're not adults yet.
So how does all of this play out in Ireland specifically? You mentioned the Irish Constitution earlier. And I have to admit, I don't know much about it. Does it complicate things?
It does a bit. See, the Irish Constitution strongly protects the family as a unit. It's deeply rooted in their culture and history. However, it doesn't explicitly lay out independent rights for children.
Ah, I see where this is going. So you're saying that this lack of clarity in the Constitution could lead to situations where parental rights are prioritized, even if it might not be in the best interest of the child.
You got it. And there have been some real-life cases in Ireland that highlight this tension. To really understand the issue, let's look at two of them. The article dives into the PKU case from 2001 and what's often called the Baby Ann case from 2006.
Okay, bring on the legal drama. Tell me more about this PKU case. What happened there?
Well, this case involved a newborn baby whose parents refused to allow a routine heel prick test. This test screens for a rare genetic disorder called PKU, which can be managed with early intervention.
Wait, so the test could have helped the child, but the parents said no. I'm guessing there's more to this story.
There is. The parents believed that the test itself would harm their child. Ultimately, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they sided with the parents. The court prioritized the family's right to make medical decisions for their child, even though it meant potentially overlooking the child's individual health needs.
Wow, that's a tough one. It sounds like a classic example of the conflict we're talking about. So what about the Baby Ann case? How does that fit into the picture?
This one is from 2006, and it involves adoption. In this case, the Supreme Court again sided with the biological parents' rights, even though Baby Ann, as she's referred to in the article, had already formed a strong bond with her adoptive parents.
So in both cases, parental rights, which are strongly emphasized in the Irish Constitution's view of the family, were given more weight in the child's individual needs or desires.
Exactly, and this is what has sparked a lot of debate in Ireland. People are asking, does the Irish Constitution need to be amended to better reflect the principles of the UNCRC, which Ireland agreed to uphold? The author of our article thinks so. But she argues that the current proposals for change don't go far enough.
All right, so we're starting to see how this abstract idea of children's rights plays out in real-world, often emotionally charged situations. And it sounds like Ireland is still grappling with how to find the right balance. But before we dive into what those potential changes might look like, let's take a step back and think about what we've learned so far. From these cases, it seems like the Irish legal system really emphasizes the family unit as a whole.
That's a great observation, and that emphasis is important to understand. But it also raises a question: how can we make sure that within that strong family structure, children's individual rights are also recognized and protected?
That's a great question, and I'm guessing that's what we'll explore as we continue our deep dive.
You got it. There's a lot more to unpack here.
Okay, so We've established that Ireland's got this strong emphasis on family unity, but it sometimes creates tension with the idea of independent rights for children. Now, I'm really curious to hear what the article proposes. What needs to change in the Irish legal system to better protect those rights?
Well, before we jump into specific changes, it's important to remember that the article isn't advocating for some radical dismantling of family structures or parental authority. It's not about turning kids against their parents or anything like that.
Right, that makes sense. It's more about finding a balanced way to ensure everyone's fundamental rights are respected.
Exactly. The article highlights ways the Irish legal system could do a better job of upholding children's rights within the family structure. It's about finding solutions that support both.
I'm all ears. What kind of solutions are we talking about?
One major point the article emphasizes is the need for robust family support systems. Think of it this way. If families have access to the resources and support they need, it's less likely that a child's well-being will be compromised in the first place.
So it's about being proactive and addressing the root causes of potential problems before they escalate into legal battles.
Precisely. Instead of waiting for things to fall apart, let's create a system that helps families thrive from the start.
Okay, I like that approach. What else does the article suggest?
Another important point is the focus on family-based care for children who can't live with their biological parents. The article argues that we should prioritize options like foster care and adoption that keep children connected to a loving family environment rather than resorting to institutionalization.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about recognizing the importance of families, but also acknowledging that families need support to function well. Almost like a two-pronged approach.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about strengthening the family unit from both inside and out. And there's another really interesting point the article raises. It argues that legal provisions related to families should be non-discriminatory.
Okay, this sounds pretty straightforward. What does that look like in practice?
For example, it means ensuring that a child's relationship with their parents is protected regardless of things like marital status. The rights and responsibilities should be the same whether the parents are married or not.
So, for example, unmarried fathers should have the same legal rights and opportunities to be involved in their children's lives as married fathers.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that a child's well-being is best served by having strong, supportive relationships with all their parents and extended family whenever possible, and that the law shouldn't create unnecessary barriers to those relationships.
This is all making a lot of sense. But the big question is, how do we actually move from these ideals to concrete legal changes? I know you mentioned that the article's author thinks amending the Irish Constitution is key, but she wasn't entirely satisfied with the current proposals, right?
That's right. She argues that simply adding a few lines about children's rights to the Constitution isn't enough. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. It might cover the problem superficially, but it doesn't address the underlying structural issues.
So she's calling for something more substantial, a more fundamental shift.
Exactly. She advocates for a much bolder move, inserting a clear and unambiguous statement of children's rights directly into the Constitution. It would be like saying, listen up, everyone. Children's rights are fundamental, and we're serious about upholding them.
Wow, I can see how that would send a powerful message. But what would that actually look like in practice? What kind of language are we talking about?
The article suggests establishing a constitutional principle that makes the best interests of the child a primary consideration in all decisions that affect them.
So judges, social workers, lawmakers, everyone involved in these complex cases would have to prioritize what's truly best for the child.
Yes, it's about shifting the entire legal landscape toward a more child-centered approach. And there's another fascinating proposal that goes hand in hand with this, incorporating the child's right to be heard directly into the Constitution.
Well, hold on. So you're saying that children would actually get to voice their opinions and have those views taken seriously in legal proceedings?
That's the idea. Of course, it would need to be done in a way that's appropriate to the child's age and maturity. But the principle is that children are not just passive recipients of decisions made by adults. They have their own thoughts, feelings, and perspectives that deserve to be part of the process.
That's a pretty revolutionary idea. I can see how that could be a game changer. But I'm also realizing how much work is involved in making these changes happen. It's not just about changing laws, it's about changing attitudes and societal norms.
You're absolutely right. And the author emphasizes that true progress requires a fundamental shift in how we view children, not just as vulnerable beings in need of protection, but as individuals with rights agency and a voice that deserves to be heard. It's about respecting them as full members of society right from the start.
Okay, so we've talked about all these potential changes. But I wonder, what does the article say about how these reforms would actually work in practice? I mean, these are pretty big, abstract ideas. How do they translate into real-world solutions?
Well, the article doesn't go into specific step-by-step implementation plans, but it does lay out a broad vision for a more child-centered legal system. It's about creating a system where the rights and well-being of children are considered at every level of decision-making.
Okay, I can see that. But I'm also wondering, how would these changes impact families as a whole? Would they create more tension, or could they actually lead to more harmonious family dynamics?
That's a great question, and that's where things get really interesting. The article suggests that. The article suggests that a stronger emphasis on children's rights within families could actually lead to better outcomes for everyone involved.
Wait, really? So it's not just about protecting children from potential harm, but also about creating an environment where families can thrive as a whole.
Precisely. When children feel heard, respected, and empowered, it can positively impact their relationships with their parents and siblings.
That makes sense. If kids feel like their opinions matter, they're probably more likely to cooperate and engage in a healthy way. It's not about giving them free rein, but about fostering mutual respect.
You've got it. The article even suggests that this approach could lead to greater access to services and better support for families overall.
So it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
By prioritizing children's well-being, we're actually creating a more supportive and just society for everyone.
Now you're connecting the dots. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about children's roles in families and society. It's about seeing them as active participants, not just passive recipients of care.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's a complex issue, but one that's worth grappling with.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and being open to new perspectives.
Like I said. So to wrap things up for you today, we've explored the fascinating and often challenging intersection of children's rights and family dynamics using Ireland as a compelling case study. We've delved into landmark legal cases, dissected constitutional debates, and even touched on the potential for positive societal change.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question based on the source material. It wasn't explicitly addressed in our discussion, but it's something I think is worth pondering. Could a stronger emphasis on children's rights within families ultimately lead to better outcomes for both children and families?
Ooh, that's a great one. It challenges us to think beyond the traditional power dynamics within families and consider the potential benefits of a more balanced and rights-based approach. It's definitely something for you to mull over.
Indeed. Because ultimately, creating a world where children's rights are fully realized benefits us all.
Well, on that inspiring note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this complex topic with us. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.